All right, today we're talking about Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz. And look, you might have heard of him because of that nasty fight he had over who invented calculus, right? But his real story, oh, it's so much bigger than that. We're talking about a lifelong quest for one single massive idea, a system for everything. So let's just jump straight into his head for a second. This quote right here, it tells you everything you need to know. This wasn't just a smart guy. His brain was a full-blown idea factory, just buzzing with new concepts from the second he opened his eyes. And the output from that factory? Whoa. I mean, to really wrap your head around it, just look at this number, 120. And get this, that's how many giant volumes his unpublished papers are going to fill. We're talking about a literal mountain of thought that people are still trying to sort through centuries later. But here's the thing, all that brain power wasn't just random. It wasn't genius for genius's sake. Nope, it was all pointed in one direction, toward a single massive ambition. So what was it? What was the lifelong obsession that drove one of the greatest minds in history? Okay, it started with a goal so ridiculously ambitious, it's almost hard to wrap your head around. He wanted to end all human arguments, forever. Not by winning debates, but by creating a perfect universal language based on pure reason. He even gave it this really grand name, the characteristica universalis. Basically, he pictured it as an alphabet of human thoughts, where every single fundamental idea gets its own unique symbol. And if that sounds kind of familiar, well, it should. This is a direct ancestor of modern computing. I mean, the audacity of this clan is just wow. Just imagine it. You take a huge philosophical debate, translate it into these symbols, and then you just solve it, like a math equation. Any disagreement, ethics, science, whatever, could be settled just by saying, all right, let's calculate. Now, that universal language, well, it turned out to be a bit of a dream. But in his search for the simplest, most fundamental symbols he could find, he stumbled onto something else. Something that, and I mean this literally, powers the world you and I are living in right now. He's the guy who perfected the binary system. We use 10 digits, right? 0 through 9. Probably because we have 10 fingers, it makes sense. But Leibniz saw this incredible, profound simplicity in using just 2. He figured out that any number, no matter how huge, could be written out using just 1s and 0s. But for Leibniz, this was way more than just a clever math trick. Not at all. He looked at binary and saw something much, much deeper. He saw a blueprint for creation itself. Think about it. To him, the number 1, that was God. Unity, the source of everything. And 0, that was nihilo, nothingness, the void. And from just those two things, God and nothing, everything, the entire universe could be brought into existence. This idea was so powerful that his boss, Duke Rudolf August, was totally blown away and had it put on a medal. So, this whole search for a divinely ordered, perfectly harmonious system, well, it naturally led him right up against one of the oldest, toughest questions in philosophy, the problem of evil. Oh yeah, you know the one. It's the classic head-scratcher. If God is all good and all-powerful, then why is there so much suffering and evil in the world? If the Creator is perfect, why isn't the creation? Okay, so Leibniz's answer is built on one of his key ideas, the principle of sufficient reason. It sounds fancy, but it's pretty simple. Nothing just happens for no reason. For everything that exists, there's a reason why it is the way it is, and not some other way. And, crucially, this rule applies even to God. And that principle leads to this really wild idea. Leibniz basically said that in God's mind, there's an infinite number of possible worlds, just endless variations. But since God is perfectly good and rational, he had a sufficient reason to choose to create only one. And which one did he pick? This one, the one we're in, because it's the one with the best possible balance of harmony and perfection. Now, this is the key part of his whole argument. He was not saying our world is perfect. I mean, obviously not. He was saying it's the best of all possible worlds. It's the optimal trade-off. In this grand system, even evil has a purpose. It helps create a greater overall good. Kind of like how a painter uses dark shadows to give a painting depth and make the light parts shine even brighter. That's the core idea of his masterpiece, the Theodicy. But for a guy so obsessed with harmony, Leibniz's own life wasn't always that harmonious, especially when it came to his most famous and most bitter public fight. Yeah, the brawl with Isaac Newton over who invented calculus, it got ugly. I mean, it became one of the nastiest intellectual feuds in history. Just look at how this all went down. The Royal Society in London, with Newton as president, by the way, sets up a committee to investigate. And surprise, surprise, they find Leibniz guilty of plagiarism. The craziest part? The final report that called him a thief was secretly written by Newton himself. That verdict basically destroyed Leibniz's reputation in England for decades.
So yeah, there were bitter fights and huge, unfinished projects. But let's not miss the bigger picture here. Because the tools that Leibniz created along the way, during his quest for universal harmony, they ended up becoming the absolute foundation of the world we live in today. Seriously, his fingerprints are everywhere. The phone or computer you're watching this on right now, it runs on binary, his system of zeros and ones. That dream he had of a calculus of reason, it directly inspired the symbolic logic that underpins all of computer science and AI. It's not an exaggeration to say that we are living in a world built from the pieces of his grand, unfinished quest. You know, Leibniz had this really cool way of looking at progress. He didn't think it was just a straight line, always moving forward. He saw it as a spiral. You go around, you revisit old ideas, and then you use that to leap forward to something new and better. And honestly, that's the perfect way to describe his own legacy, right? An old idea that just keeps getting more and more relevant. And that kind of leaves us with one last thought, doesn't it? Here we are, building this incredibly complex digital world, full of algorithms and endless data, a world that often feels more divided and chaotic than ever. So maybe, just maybe, Leibniz's biggest dream, his quest for a universal system of harmony and reason, maybe that's the project we've only just started.